Bonjour, I'm your host, Alistair. There are two keys to success. The first one is luck, and the second one is preparation. Luck, there's nothing we can do about that. Preparation, it is absolutely your responsibility. So in today's video, I'm going to share with you from my experiences, the most important steps that you need to take, or, from my opinion, you would have to take in order to make that first step in purchasing an investment property, preferably a rental. Pay attention. You are now a for-profit business, so we need to act like one. Number one, we need to track our expenses. Everything, absolutely everything. One of the big perks of operating as a business is that you're going to have access to deductions. It's important that you write down anything that is related to the property in question, whether you get in the car and travel there, you buy gas, you buy food on the way to the property, you do XYZ, anything that you can relate a dot to correlate the purchase of the property, write it down on a piece of paper, or better yet, on an Excel spreadsheet. Because when it comes to taxes, you're going to share that with your accountant, and he's going to tell you which expense is appropriate and which is not. Once you've made the purchase, the next step is to transfer the home to your LLC. And I explain to you why. It's called a corporate veil. If anything was to happen within the property, either with a tenant, you could be liable, severely liable. And so it's important that you protect all the other assets that is now related to the property in question. For most people, it's the primary residence. You don't want to get a tenant in your rental and then something bad happens and you lose everything, including your primary home. It can happen. You can end up homeless if you are not careful with liability. By transferring the product, so by transferring the home to your company, your LLC, it creates a corporate veil. Now remember step one, I told you to track all the expenses, because part of the game into keeping the corporate veil, you have to respect the corporate veil. And what does that mean? You don't commingle the finances. And we'll talk about that on the next point. About the due on clause, which is pretty much when the lender requests all the money up front. They have that option. Don't stress over it. You are not the first one to do transfer of ownership from a personal to a LLC. They've done this before. They've done it 1,000 times, right? And again, that's probably not going to happen. They just speak to your lender ahead of time. Speak about it. Converse. Don't be afraid about that. It happens all the time. So don't stress. When you put together an LLC, you are given a EIN number. That number is then used to go and open a bank account in the name of the LLC. If you're wondering what to name your LLC, especially when it comes to rentals, just for the peace of mind of your head, the name of the LLC is going to be the address of the home in question. So you don't have to think so hard as to what company am I referring to. When you open the bank account in the name of the property itself, that's the operating status quo of the business. All you rent is going to go to that account. You don't commingle any of the finances. You don't use that money to buy your groceries. You don't use that money to do XYZ. Every single piece of dollar and penny in that account needs to be used for the purposes of the LLC. And explain to you why. If you make the mistake or if you move the money improperly, you can shatter the corporate veil, and then you are left exposed. One strategy I use, and listen, it's a good way to actually, again, live below your mean. Wait 1 year. Let all the money sit in the bank account, right? All the rental income, let it sit there. When it comes to tax season, you speak to your accountant and you discuss, how do I get what is owed to me from my company the best way possible, right? So you make a withdrawal on a yearly basis. It's easy, peace of mind. You don't have to think so hard about that. One common question that I hear a lot is that, well, Alistair, if you open a company bank account, there's no money in it. How am I supposed to respect the corporate veil and pay for stuff if there's no money inside? Well, it's very simple. The IRS understands that concept. It understands. You can fund the bank account. You can go ahead and take your own personal money and put it in the bank account. When it comes to tax season, your accountant is smarter than me and you combined, and they'll know what to do. And it's important that you really work with professionals with this, because taxes, when it comes to real estate, can get very complicated very fast. Now you have the LLC. Now you have the product, the house. Now you have the bank account. The fourth important step, we need insurance. Before you do any business, you need to have insurance. It's very easy. Insurance for investment properties is very different than homeowner insurance. For the simple reason is that homeowners tend to take care of the properties more than renters. That's not me saying, that's actually the insurance saying that. And quite frankly, I agree. Because renters are transient. Homeowners are a little more careful. They're a little more caring. And so from a liability standpoint, you can expect a lot more claims from a landlord / investment property insurance. So it's going to cost you more. However, and this is an important tip, converse and shop around for the insurer. Converse and ask them the questions that I ask to my insurance, and I have Progressive. I asked a very simple question. If I was ever to get into an eviction, what do you cover? What is the best coverage that you have for me if I was ever to run into the worst of the worst case scenario? And the agent told me, very easy, very simple. Mr. Nzekio, the coverage that I have for my properties covers me potential loss of rental income. So if there's substantial damage where I have to essentially rebuild a home, if the home takes 3 months to be rebuilt, I get the claim the money to rebuild the home, of course, but I also get lost wages, right? Ask around, shop around, see who gives you the best deal, but don't be a cheapskate. See who gives you the best deal based on what you need. This is not the time to be frugal. This is your business. Do it proper. Speaking of being cheap, you get what you pay for. And when you are in a scenario like rent of real estate, the stakes are very high. Expenses are very huge. You are actually better off paying quality upfront, which will save you in the long run. So what do I mean by that? Don't move or operate without a lawyer and an accountant. Yes, of course, you have to spend the money. Nobody works for free, but it will save you money in the long run. The second thing also, when it comes to the contractors, because eventually at some point, the home will need repairs, the home will need XYZ. Don't get your cousin, don't get the neighbor, don't get just anybody. You have to get a professional that is licensed and that is also a holder of an insurance, preferably a liability insurance. You need to get a legit business. You can't just get anybody off the street, because if something was to happen within the boundaries of your product, aka your property, and you as the owner of that product decided to hire someone who is not licensed or who does not have insurance, then you are deemed negligent and you can forfeit your right to your claim. In other words, you hire your cousin to help with the plumbing and the whole house floods. You will not get a single dime from the insurance. And there it goes. There goes your investment. There goes your life savings. And don't forget, if you have a tenant in there, you are liable. You're liable. So you have to make sure that tenant is within good living conditions. It's a complete nightmare scenario. Save yourself the headache. Don't be a cheapskate. Do things correctly. So next up is rules and regulations. So why is that very important? For the simple fact is that you are in the business of housing humans. And it is very well protected. So you need to be very careful not to break the law. There are federal parameters, there are state parameters, county parameters, there are plenty of parameters. And so if you don't have the aptitude to be looking for, for needles, in quotes, then you're most likely going to miss important steps. And that's why, again, it's important that you always consult a lawyer to help you guide through all that mess. But there's a caveat to that. Because the states, the counties, and the local laws may be different, you might need to get a local lawyer to help you with your property if your property is out of state. One more example, a lot of states now are requesting rental licenses to be issued in order for you to start renting. Now, that doesn't stop you from actually renting to a tenant. But should any cause of actions between the landlord and the tenant arise, and when you go to court, they will ask you for that rental license. And if you don't have that rental license, this is just an example, they will punish you to the maximum extent of the law. And one of the punishments is the entirety of the rent that was paid needs to be returned with interest and penalty to the tenant. Don't play with that. Speaking of tenant, the lease agreement is your contract. The product is the house. The lease agreement is the contract. And so by mastering your lease agreement, you're going to do two things for yourself. It's going to give you peace of mind because you're going to understand exactly what's outlined in a contract. But the second thing that does, it also allows you to pseudo understand the regulations and also allows you to kind of see what you like and what you don't like in terms of doing business with a tenant. Not a particular tenant per se, but a tenant in general. And so in the lease agreement, you have options as a landlord. You could put addendums, right? Refrain from printing it online. These are standard lease agreements. Remember I talked to you about how regulation can change from state to county? Online lease agreements are grosso modo, they're very general. They're not very specific into the laws and regulation that governs your property. Work with your attorney to draft together a lease agreement. And as you do that, you speak to your attorney, this is what I want, this is what I don't want, this is what I want, this is what I don't want, and they will put something together. And if anything changes, just add an addendum. All right? I'll give you one more example. When it comes to utilities, some states allow you, the landlord, to transfer utilities or have the tenant pay utilities. Some other states only allow partial utilities to be paid by the tenant. Your lease needs to reflect that. It needs to. Because if it doesn't, the court has a standard or procedure to how to interpret the lease should specificities are not listed, right? When it also comes to utilities, when you speak to PSE&G, for example, the utility provider, I will caution you not to actually get a landlord account. And the reason why is because landlord accounts are, should your tenant fail to pay their utility, then the provider can bypass, because there's landlord account with your permission, bypass billing the tenant and actually bill you and pretty much let you collect the money from the tenant. Don't do that. So now you have everything in place and you're pretty much ready. You're ready to actually get your tenant in there and have your product generate you some income. You have to vet the tenant. It's important. When it comes to rental real estate, a poor tenant, a bad tenant, I should say, a bad tenant can cost you a lifetime. I am documenting in this channel, and for those who are new here, my experience monetarily wise from having one tenant who didn't pay rent for just 7 months. it's taken me 4 years to recuperate that loss to a net zero. 4 years for just 7 months of non-pay. So this is just to tell you that your vetting tool, the best thing you can do for your property, for your product, is to get a proper tenant in there. Now, I've also made a video where I discuss about unspoken tips when it comes to finding the proper tenant. And here's what I have to say to that. You can go there and check it out after this video. And of course, press like, subscribe. It really helps the channel if you are at this point and you're enjoying the content. I cannot tell you publicly here in the public space really some of the details for the simple fact that I don't want to break the law. But what I will tell you, and I explained that in my video about some of the tips unspoken about, I want you to be curious. Public records are there for a reason. Search. You have a tenant, search the public records. Search the public records from every state they've been, right? Take all their addresses and search. Be curious on the public records from the states that they've been. And then make your conclusion and deduct whatever you may want to deduct. Of course, consult with your lawyer at the end of the day. But in order to get the best educated guess about someone you don't know, especially when it comes to our product, which is a rental property that is governed by laws and regulations that are pretty strict, you need to make sure you get someone in there that is decent. Decent, not perfect, decent. Decent to what? Decent to your product. Because your product is your home. And if the person is not decent with your product, i.e. damaged the property, has history of questionable behaviors that leads to property damages, that may not be the best tenant for you, right? But I cannot tell you that. You have to go in there and really be curious and look. Public records, it's available to the public. Anybody with a bad attitude that has gone through court, they will have a record, and you go to the state in question and access the public record and look. Is this person there? Yes or no? And then you make the best educated, lawful decision based on that. Last point I have to say is you have to stay ahead of the curve. What does that mean, stay ahead of the curve? I'll give you an example. States and regulation change almost all the time. Almost all the time. And so you need to somewhat be aware of what is happening, what is going on politically, publicly, but also on the local level where your property resides, because you need to be ahead of the curve in case you need to pivot, in case you need to re-strategize. You have to pay attention. Another reason why you need to stay ahead of the curve is your team. Your team might change. The lawyer might retire. The contractor might be like, I don't want to do contractor anymore. Like, you have to be attuned and get in touch with and connect and contact with your team and see how they're doing, what's going on. You have to stay in touch. You cannot be aloof. The other thing is, as in staying ahead of the curve, is your tenant. Pay attention as in how many maintenance tickets are happening. What's the attitude like? Write down everything that is going on, because you need to get an educated picture, at least for the first year, of really how is the investment doing. Another thing also, staying ahead of the curve, is your expenses. For the whole year, track it down, because you need to see at the end of the year when you do your finances, right? You need to see, where can I cut costs? What cost me too much? Why? You need to operate this like a business. This is not fun and game, and you are a for-profit business. That being said, you have to listen to your gut as well, right? And understand that only one person pays the consequences, and that's you. So the decisions you make, only you can make the best decision. So make the best decision for you, your family, and your investment. So that's what it means, staying ahead of the curve. Don't sleep. Be active. Be aware. What's going on? What's happening? Where do I go? What is that? What's happening? Yeah, there's nothing passive about that. And of course, congratulations to this very, very interesting world of being a landlord. It's a lot of work, but I'm sure you can handle it. All right, that's it for today. Thank you so much I appreciate you more than you know. Press like, subscribe, and I will see you next time. I am your host, Alistair.